Good afternoon, Kathy.
Well, you heard it from Boris Johnson. He didn't mislead Parliament. The committee has found no evidence of that. What's your view?
Well, it is rather extraordinary. I don't know if he's read the report carefully, and of course he does have form here for not reading things carefully enough. I mean, I've looked at it. I've read it 3 times this afternoon. I've looked at the new photographic evidence. I find it really quite astonishing that he's trying to bluff his way through it yet again. We know that he knew what the rules were because he announced them repeatedly from 10 Downing Street into our own homes on those nightly press conferences. So we knew he knew what the rules were. Let's just take one example. The 14th of January 2021, England was in tier 4. There shall be no social gatherings indoors of 2 or more people. And even when there are, there must be no more than, you must be you can't be any closer than 2 meters apart. Now, that's pretty clear. It's also pretty clear that he was at an event where that was taking place. So he did know what the rules were. He knows where he was. I think the fact that he's saying now that on the 1st of December 2021 and the 8th of December, that he was correct in saying there was no parties and no rules were broken is quite astonishing. I think it beggars belief, frankly. And it also sets a really bad taste because it shows that even now he's still trying to bluff his way out of it. He's still failing to abide by those important standards of public life, as was just mentioned. As the Prime Minister, he was responsible for them. As the Prime Minister now, Rishi Sunak is responsible. He said he came to number 10 Downing Street to enforce, bring back integrity and accountability. I think that shows what he thinks of what's been happening. But he was around too. He was next door. He was actually at one of those parties. But it matters that Rishi also addresses it.
OK, I'll come back to that in a minute, and also Boris Johnson's point about the officials. But, Boris Johnson has made a reasonable point that a lot of the evidence in this report relies on Sue Gray's evidence, and she's now going to be Chief of Staff to your leader. Does that slightly tarnish her findings, or at least, place a question mark over her impartiality?
The committee does not rely solely on Sue Gray's evidence.
Not solely, but quite heavily.
But also, I think it's really quite rich for Boris Johnson, again, to start impugning things about Sue Gray's integrity. I mean, not long ago, all the Tory MPs were lining up to say what a great person she was and how full of integrity she was, just because she's now made a career change and I'm delighted that she's going to come and help the Labour Party, I hope, if she gets through that process of scrutiny on the COBA Appointments Committee. But to come back to what Boris Johnson is saying, I think it really is quite extraordinary. There are new photographs in this report. There's new evidence from WhatsApps, which involve Mr. Johnson's communications assistant saying, obviously quite genuinely, that he doesn't really understand how he's going to spin his way out of it effectively. It really is quite a red herring, in my view, to start pointing at Sue Gray and saying none of this counts.
But Thangam, wait a minute on that point. I mean, you're very happy to hasten back to the findings of the Privileges Committee today. I don't blame you for that. I can see why you're trying to do that. But isn't this a bit of an own goal by Labour? Because, you've muddied the water where we would all be talking about Boris Johnson and the Tory party's problems today. And actually now we're also talking about this row that we're having over your new Chief of Staff.
Well, we're not having a row over it. We're delighted that Sue Gray has said she'd like to come and join our team to help us prepare for government. There has to be a process first. It has to go through the advisory committee on business appointments. It's got to go through that. That will be a rigorous process, which I know we will be abiding by. I think it really says quite a lot about Keir Starmer that he's taking seriously his responsibilities as possibly the next Prime Minister, I hope, to prepare us all for government by employing people who have skills and experience in that area and whose integrity is impeccable.
Now, I think I'm afraid the sound has been slightly dodgy, I'm afraid, but I think we've lost you, Thangam, unfortunately. You're back.
I just stopped talking. I think I just got to the end of my answer.
Extraordinary for an MP to stop talking. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Let me just go back to the evidence which you were talking about and Boris Johnson's response to it, because he said in the clip that he's just done for multiple TV outlets just now, he said he just turned up to events that as Prime Minister you're sort of shepherded around and, you do what your officials tell you. I mean, he's obviously trying to sort of dump on his officials there, but is that a credible defence? Because if the committee doesn't find any evidence that he was advised by his officials in clearly and, without any sort of controversy, he could be off the hook, couldn't he, on that?
Well, I think there's 2 levels there, isn't there? As you've said, he's trying to dump the blame on his officials. He was the Prime Minister. He announced the rules. He signed off on the rules. The buck stopped with him. He was the one who asked us to stay at home because it was important for everybody's safety. He was the one who signed off on those rules as we went through those very hard times. So while other people up and down the country were abiding by the rules, a great person and real pain, he didn't just drop by those parties. And if he did, his duty as Prime Minister, as a leader, should have been to say, hang on a minute, this is not sticking to the rules. Right. He should also be setting a culture, a tone of abiding by the rules.
Okay.
He wants to lead by example.
Just finally, I mean, he is yesterday's man. You know, he's had to accept defeat pretty much on the Northern Ireland Protocol. His successor, Rishi Sunak, has done a deal on that. He's a much calmer presence in Downing Street. He looks more like a man of integrity, doesn't he? So, you know, are you struggling now to make political hay out of all of this?
We're trying to prepare for government, which is what a responsible opposition party 15 months probably out from a general election should be doing. I'm glad that there is a calmer atmosphere at the top of the government, but Rishi Sunak is also culpable. And if he really wants to set that tone and continue with that tone of integrity and accountability, he said he wants to, he needs to make clear that he will abide by the recommendations of this committee, and that if the committee finds that Boris Johnson did mislead the House of Commons, did lie effectively, that he should abide by their recommendations and not with his MPs to vote against the findings of that report.
At Times Radio, we bring the front pages to life. Tune in to hear me, Cathy Newman, on Drive every Friday, 4 till 7.